And I think the other defining thing, and not so much that I was a defining thing. I'm just trying to remember when I was sitting there. Like, I was surprised about how much I know about your career without actually researching it. Just because I knew you. There were times where I'd go to your house and you had all big wads of money because you came down here in probably, 1988?
88, 89, yeah.
And you and Nick DiPaolo, who you've known
together.
for years,
Yeah.
and people see him on the show, you lived together in that fucked up apartment.
Yes.
That Barry Katz owned.
Barry Katz's apartment. Barry Katz, who's, he created Last Comic Standing, right?
He's Dane Cook's manager. He's Whitney Cummings' manager.
Yes.
I think he's still Jay Moore's manager.
Anthony
He was
Clark, all those people.
Yeah, I mean, he used to run a comedy operation out of a basement in Allston, Massachusetts,
Yes.
and there was a period in time where he just said, "I'm going to sign everybody."
Yeah,
and
I was his
signed
first
with him.
client. I was his first client, and I was also the first person to fire him.
Yeah.
But anyway, Barry had an apartment on 82nd Street in Central Park West, a little tiny studio.
Right.
With like one of those, like a stove that looks like it's a dollhouse, like it's a joke.
Yeah.
And it had a loft. So
Yeah.
I had a bed up on this rickety loft and a bed underneath it.
Yeah.
And he charged comedians from Boston $150 each per month to have a right to use this apartment.
How many were there?
There was like 15 guys. And it was a terrible combination of guys. Anthony Clark was one of them.
Yeah.
Ed Regine, the guy from Providence.
The guy who was put
Al
in jail
Ducharme.
for turning back odometers.
Yes, and Wally Collins was one of them. Anyway, Nick and I went down there a lot.
Yeah.
And then Barry lost he was giving up, the lease came up.
Yeah.
And he didn't want to do it anymore. I don't think he was making enough profit. He was trying to make a profit.
Sure.
And he wasn't making enough, so he was giving it up.
Yeah.
And Nick and I contacted the landlord when we got the place.
Right, and then and you and Nick were working at Catch a Rising Star, and I was wandering through the streets with Todd Berry, wondering why we couldn't work at Catch a Rising Star. Yeah. And I just remember you taking out of your pocket wads of cash after an evening at work.
Yeah,
and I was just sort of like, fuck. But he's doing that to hate me.
Well, yeah, so that was a cash business then, and you'd get $50 a show, and there was that one really heightened time in the late 80s.
Yeah, where it just money.
You could do 10 sets a night.
That's right.
And they were $50 each, and I had a motorcycle then.
Oh, yeah, the fucking motorcycle.
I had a Honda Super Sport 750.
And that was that time where you used to run up and down the FDR, and then you wrecked it.
I used to go on the FDR doing like literally 100 miles an hour so I could get to shows quicker. And I'd do like 2 shows at the Boston Comedy Club.
Yeah.
1 at the Cellar, 1 at the Village Gate, or 2 at the Village Gate, and then I'd run screaming uptown to do the Catch and the comic strip. And
Didn't you wreck that fucker?
A show, yes.
You laid it down. It freaked you out. You somehow walked away from it.
Yeah, it was a weird turning point in my life because that was. I remember one day. It's just funny because you mentioned the pockets full of cash.
Yeah.
I remember one night I'd done like 10 shows.
Yeah.
And I was 23 years old, something like that. 22 years old.
Yeah.
And I parked my bike at my garage in the Village.
Yeah.
And I had my pockets were bulging with cash that I had made. And I mean, $50 a show, 10 shows. So what's that? That's $500.
Yeah.
$500 for a night's work.
Right.
23 years old, and then I'm walking to my Bleecker Street Village apartment.
Yeah, I remember you had the parking space across the way. It was a walk.
Yeah,
and you also had cars there too, didn't you? You bought these weird muscle cars.
But so when I remember there's one specific night that I was walking home with a ton of cash from my motorcycle to my Village apartment, and I thought I have the greatest life in the world.
Yeah,
I don't even care if I don't become famous or anything. This is the balls.
Yeah.
I have the world by the fucking balls. I had that thought that night.
Yeah. And
then the next night, I was going down 2nd Avenue doing about 70 miles an hour, and a car went through a red light going perpendicular. And I never even touched my brakes. I just plowed right into this car.
And he flew over it.
I flew over the car. I lost my sight, but I was still cognizant, I remember. Yeah. And the bike was in pieces. My sight came back, and the bike was in pieces in front of me. I heard a woman scream. It was a nightmare. And I got strapped to a board and taken to a hospital. And after lots of CAT scans and tests and shit, this doctor came to me in the hallway of, you don't have a room.
Yeah.
And he said, "You're fine. You're stupid. Don't ride motorcycles anymore, but you're fine." And he said, take it easy for a while. And so I hopped off of this table, and I thought, I'm just going to go home. But, you know, the threshold to which you need to be hospitalized is still pretty, like, you still pretty badly. I really fucked myself up, and I could barely walk. I mean, I was in really bad, but I hadn't broke anything. So
Everything was sore.
my whole body had bruises all over the side of it that grew as the weeks went by. Like, for 2 weeks, I was, like, in bed.
Like on your hip and shit?
Yeah, on my leg, and
Yeah.
I was a fucking wreck, and my motorcycle was gone.
Yeah.
And I slept that night, and I just felt really terrible. I think I'd peed myself. Like, it was just really bad, humiliating experience. And then I looked in the mirror the next day, and I was balding. I saw it for the first time.
Yeah.
That I was losing my hair.
Right.
And, like, within that week, Catch Rising Star closed. That was the first. Catch and the Improv went down, like, 1-2. Mm-hmm. They both closed. And things started getting really bad. Like, things immediately started getting bad. And then the 90s came, and all the clubs started closing.
Yeah.
And I couldn't make a living anymore, and I couldn't pay my rent. Like, that night was a huge, instant turning point. Everything from that night on in my life went badly.